He'd be a part of our worship team, but I had no intention of going anywhere near music because music was my God in my life. God, my music represented Christ to me, like before I was a Christian. And so, in order for me to go into music, I felt like I would be drawn back into that, just loving the music more than anything else. But he said to me, he said, Jonathan, he said, you've got to give up your Mohawk heritage in order to have Jesus. And this is a guy who truly was filled with the love of God. Just filled with the love of God. I never knew anybody that could he would just cry as he would give you his message about how much Jesus loved us, you know. So I knew the sincerity in his heart. I sensed that beautiful sincerity. But when he told me that I had to give up my Mohawk heritage to have Jesus, I was just stabbed inside. I was ripped. Because I was proud. Dad brought me up to be proud. He brought me up to love the language. He brought me up to love the culture, you know, and so I didn't know what to do. But then I made a decision. What do I want? I asked myself, what do you want most? Do you want Jesus or do you want your culture? So I was forced to make a choice in this situation because I found the church where I felt the love. And he said, okay, you got to make a choice. So I said, I choose Jesus. So I went home realizing that in order to go along with what he had said to me, that somehow I had to give up my Mohawk heritage. And so one of the first things I did was I went to my father's house. You remember my dad, and many of you do. Very strong Christian man, but lover of his Mohawk heritage. And I went up to my dad's house and I said, Dad, you've got all these artifacts all over your wall of Mohawk people. I mean, you've got everything. Like he had everything from our culture, like false faces, everything. I don't think he didn't worship them, but he had them up there because he was proud to be Mohawk. And I said to him, I said, those things need to come off your wall, Dad. Those things are not of God. Like I became super religious. And I started telling my dad, who had literally raised people from the dead, that he needed to stop being like he was and he needed to give up his native heritage. And he didn't fall for it. Although he went and took a couple pieces down from the wall just to placate me at the moment, he said, son, I'm not going to argue and I'm not going to fight with you about this. He said, this is your journey. He said, but I want to tell you that God loves you, I love you, and I'm not giving up my heritage. But you take your journey and do what you have to do. So I took my father to task. I wasn't nice. It was awful. It was like the religious church doing their thing, and I just went for it. But God has shown me that is so wrong. That he loves each and every one of us so much. That he sent Jesus to die for us, not to give up being who we are, but he sent Jesus to die for us so that we could have the love that he sent him for. So that we could embrace that love and that God would bind us together across all our differences. Because, you know, I always like to say how 2 Chronicles chapter 5 and verse 11, it says that the priests gathered together and entered into the most holy place. And then the next phrase says, without regard to their differences. And in verse 14, it says that as they began to worship him without regard to their differences, said they sounded as with one voice, and the presence of God descended upon them so they could no longer stand to minister. How cool is that? How cool is that? I mean, that to me is a picture of the world right there, is that if we can embrace one another and recognize Jesus in one another and celebrate one another's differences rather than say, you got to be like me. You got to be like me in order to But no, if we can look at one another and say, I'm going to celebrate the Mohawk heritage with you, even though I'm Algonquin, or even though I'm Ukrainian. You know, whatever we are, we need to celebrate Christ as all nations. Sorry, that's the underlying main message that I have today. But we're going to do a couple songs. The first song I'm going to do, these guys have never played before, so